In 2004, in a Harvard dorm, a new digital service was born, a way of college students to connect with one another. It began just in Harvard and eventually rolled out to colleges across the US. And then, of course, we all know it rolled out globally. So what was originally called the Facebook, go to the first slide, soon expanded to the world. And over its history of Facebook, it's had lots of bold claims about what it hopes to achieve in the world, as you might imagine from any tech company. As it reached global audiences in around 2008, it described itself with great humility as connecting the world. And of course, this was the time of globalization where it did feel like everything was getting brought much closer to home, and we still are in many ways are living in that time where everything felt closer. We could communicate across the world. Go to the next slide. Following research in the mid-90s, Robert Putnam published his book, Bowling Alone. Focused on the United States, his claim was that Americans were lonelier than ever. This was published in the year 2000. Social capital, which is just a fancy way of saying all the relationships that we have with one another, the interactions that glue society together, were at an all-time low. Since the 60s, peoples have been doing more and more activities, but more and more of them were alone, hence the title, Bowling Alone. And the results he found were kind of pretty profound. There were now extremely low levels of trust amongst people, making it harder, of course, to solve any problems because nobody trusts one another. Democracy was being eroded. We no longer had that sense of collective responsibility to one another. Public health and safety were worse because people didn't care for people in their neighborhoods anymore, and so therefore crime was growing and all sorts of things like that were happening. And also the economy was weaker because business thrives on social interaction. And he suggested many reasons for this, but it included things like the post-war generation didn't have that same sense of togetherness. The invention of the TV was obviously significant. People's private leisure then became sitting at home in front of a screen. There were more pressures on people's time and money. Families now needed 2 incomes in order to survive, and so people were kind of pressed in that sense. And then, of course, urban design, the way that our towns and our villages and our communities are now built, they're designed for individuals rather than for communities together. Now, this research was done well before the internet was widely in use across the world. And this analogy of bowling alone has proved to be very significant in the years since then. So fast forward to today. We have some unique challenges when it comes to technology today. A whole new industry, AI is the buzzword of the day, artificial intelligence. And it includes things like AI girlfriends and boyfriends, I kid you not. The global AI dating market is expected to be worth $9.5 billion by 2028. Go to the next slide. Character AI is one of the leading platforms. It currently has 97 million monthly users, people talking to an AI and building friendship, companionship, and for some, romantic relationship. And this affects both men and women are involved in this, and the reasons for it are very varied, but I hope you're starting to see there could be some problems here. Ever since the telegram and the telephone technology has promised us more and more connection. And in a lot of ways, technology has brought a lot of connection to us. The ability to communicate with our friends and families across the world is not something we should take lightly. It's an amazing thing. But it's also at the same time driven people more and more into isolated little pockets, little bubbles of their own. And of course, in 2020, we had the greatest social experiment ever with COVID and the pandemic, which suddenly forced us all into these isolated bubbles. And of course, we know that the impact of that was twofold. One, we all discovered some new technology. We all discovered some new things we could do with our computers. But at the same time, we left it much more anxious, much more isolated, and much more desperate for real human contact. In this series, Future Faith, I want to kind of open our eyes into the world that we live in and the technology and how it impacts our lives. How do we follow Jesus to live lives of peace and wholeness in what many have called the new digital Babylon, this world of technology that surrounds us? Now, last week I began with a bit of an overview, and we looked at how we've embraced lots of technologies, and now those technologies are competing for our attention, for our time. Some of the smartest psychologists and machine learning algorithms now are designed to get you to look at your phone more times per day. And I thought it was interesting that I talked about that last week, and then this go to the next slide. The number one top app across the world in the past week was this app called Focus Friendly, which is all about helping you focus. You get a little bean character. I downloaded it the other day. The girls love it. You get a little bean character, and you say, I want to focus for 10 minutes, and this little bean knits for 10 minutes. And if you touch your phone during that 10-minute period, the little bean goes all sad and he breaks his knitting. This is the number one app this past week on all of the app platforms, okay? It's because people have this lack of attention. They need help and tools in their distraction. But how do we follow Jesus? How do we have our attention on our rabbi and our teacher, the one that is supposed to be leading us in our lives? We all of us, end up getting distracted from the life that God has for us. So the battle for our attention is real. But today I want to switch gears slightly and talk more about our connection, the relationships, and fundamentally the promise of connection that AI gives us. But let's begin with the Bible, because that's a good place to start. And fundamentally, the Bible has lots to say on this topic, as you might imagine. But today I just want to give us one or two very short verses, very simple things for us to chew on. First is Genesis 2, verse 18. We'll have it on the screen. The Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone." Very simple. Very simple one for you. This is right back at the beginning of creation. Of course, God has created the whole universe, the planet, the plants, the animals, and he creates Adam, and then his phrase is, it's not good for him to be alone. We find out that at the very core of what it means to be human is to be made for relationship. To be made for first with relationship with God, and secondly, relationship with other humans, with other people around us. To know people and be known by them. To walk life together, to share, to grow, to develop in our lives together, to struggle together, to celebrate together is actually what we're made for. It's not good for man or woman, don't worry, women. It's not good for man or woman to be alone. And modern science has proven this. Loneliness is said to be as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The effects of loneliness in our culture are severe. Every single health outcome is worse for people who are lonely. Conversely, people who have supporting relationships around them recover quickly from illnesses, are less likely to develop diseases in the first place, and generally have better mental health and live longer. This is just through the relationships we have. This is not drugs or medications, or this is the people sitting next to you today in church. The Harvard study of adult development, if you go to the next slide, one of the longest studies that has ever been done on human happiness, has found that strong, positive relationships are the key to a happy, healthy, and long life, according to the study's director. Now, this research spans over 85 years, and they began by tracking 724 men, and then later their families, and they've expanded it over the things. But 85 years followed people and measured their happiness, their wellness, and all their kind of well-being. And it's got nothing to do with wealth, fame, career success, but rather the quality of your relationships is the thing that determines your happiness. That's what they discovered. All this money, all this time, all this energy to discover that relationships is the thing that affects the quality of your life most. So real relationships matter. So what's going on with all these digital relationships that we now have, or these mediated relationships? Well, Let's start with the very basics first. Things like email and text message are still relatively new technologies. We now live with them every day. But of course, in text-based communications like that, there are still limits, and most of you will be very well aware of the limits within them. Typing words has its limitations. Anything emotional or challenging or ambiguous is dangerous over text. If I ever have to have a difficult conversation with someone, never email, never text, because in that mode of communication, there's something lost. All the emotions are lost. That's why we invented emojis, isn't it? To try and help us with little smileys and little sad, to try and convey what we're trying to say. But even with that, there's so much room for misunderstanding. All the little cues we give one another when we're in the room together. Sharing information, great. Arranging a meeting, great. Heart to heart, not so much. And so text is great, but we still miss out on a lot. And so platforms like Twitter or X, as it's called now, where they force people to speak in very short text bursts, guess what? It descends into absolute chaos, name-calling, and basically one-upmanship. That is basically what modern-day X looks like these days. And of course, the next level from text communication is video calls. For those who were not familiar with video calls before the pandemic, we got a kind of refresher course on how to have all these video calls. And video calls are that one step further, aren't they? Where it's nicer to see someone's face. You can tell something from their emotions and their communication. But if we're honest, for those of us who spent hours on Zoom calls during the pandemic, it's exhausting. It's draining. You come away from them like, not the same as being in the room with someone. It really is not the same. And we need to bring it up even further today with these artificial intelligence chatbots. But before we dive into it, I said I want to try and talk to us at a level that we all understand. So I want to do a little AI explainer for you, okay? This is where we're at with AI, and I'm going to simplify it right down. If you know nothing, this is hopefully a little intro to AI. So AI explainer, we'll go to the next slide here. So AI is not a brand new term. Artificial intelligence has been around for a long time, almost as long as computers themselves have been around. I got taught about it in university. I did computing at university 20-odd years ago. And as soon as in the 40s and 50s computers started to show promise, the idea that computers might behave like humans was thought about by this guy called Alan Turing. He invented the Turing test, which is basically a test to say if somebody sat down and chatted to a computer and chatted to a person, could they tell the difference? Would they be able to know the difference? So he created this test in the 1950s, and some people claim that they're pretty close to that stage today. But artificial intelligence has been really slow going if looking at the field since the 50s. There's not been huge breakthroughs in AI until recently. So in 2017, someone at Google developed a new technology called transformer architecture. You don't need to know anything about it, but they invented this new technology in 2017, and that started off this new trend that we're on at the moment, where they invented what's called large language models, LLMs. You'll see it shortened to. So they've invented this new tool called large language models. What are these? Very basic. You feed them lots and lots of data. And what they do is they predict the best outcome based on all of that data. So they're basically math machines that take in all of the information and then spit out what it thinks is going to be the best answer. And the reason that people have got very excited about this is because, one, we had so much information, we could give them the internet to learn on. And two, the results sound and feel very human. We now can talk to these things and they talk back. It's strange. If you've used them, you'll be familiar the first time you use them, you're like, that's weird. And if we give them enough data, trillions of it, they give more and more better responses. If you've tried ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever models, it can be very impressive. 2022 was when ChatGPT was launched, and it massively reshaped the face of our planet. And the big breakthrough is really in how human-like it feels. That's the biggest breakthrough that's happened. But I'm kind of oversimplifying a little bit, but all of these large language models simply work by predicting the next best word. So if we go to the next slide, See if you can help me with this one. Mary had a little lamb. Now, this is obviously a massive oversimplification of what these vast systems are doing, but that's essentially what they're doing. Given all the text in the world, what is the next most likely words that are going to come in these gaps? And that's how they work. And these models, though, give you a real sense of intelligence. They feel very intelligent. There's a debate as to whether they really are intelligent. I have thoughts on that. We can talk about it later. But that's how they work. They're predicting the next word. And not just doing that, they're now doing it with text, audio, and video, which is the next level of impressive and also the next level of scary, because we get deep fakes. We can now make someone sound like you and look like you and say things you would never say. Now, I'm going to try something that you should never try with technology, and that's a live demo. This may or may not work, but I have up here an AI chatbot. And it's going to talk to us. Maybe. Excuse the Californian accent. They're all from California.
Hey there. Got a free moment? Or are you in the middle of something?
I'm actually in the middle of a sermon at the moment at church on artificial intelligence.
Whoa. No way. That's unexpected, honestly. A sermon on AI?
Yeah.
That's kind of meta, right?
I know
what
it's
angle
not.
Are you taking with it?
I know it's not a good idea, but I'm trying to do a live demo.
Okay, that explains a lot. Live demo during a sermon, that's ambitious. And yeah, I get the hesitation. It's a tricky subject, for sure. So you're using me as like the exhibit A? What are people thinking so far?
Well, there's lots of worried faces so far.
Worrying cases, huh?
Worried faces, I could see that.
Great? As in, great, that's what I was expecting, great, or something else?
I don't think you're understanding me. That's just a little demonstration. Hopefully you can tell how sophisticated these things are getting now, all the ums and ahs and chat. That's the world in which we're in, and that's why there's so much hype around it at the moment, is how realistic the tone and the voice and all of these things are. So next time you get a phone call, make sure it's a real person. Yeah. And there's a lot of wow factor in here, and there's a big debate as to whether this is an artificial intelligence bubble, and my thought is I think it actually is. But this is a lot of hype. But what's the problem? And hopefully you can see the problem. It's not too difficult. But the first problem, we'll put it on the screen. This is simulated connection. This is an actual connection. Now, we've always been in awe of things that can sound human. So sci-fi has obviously existed for a long time. Books and movies where you can talk to the computer and it can talk back to you is amazing. All of these AI tools are not real relationships or connections. I hope you can tell that. They're designed to sound very human, to look very human, to pull us in. And they talk in terms of emotion. They talk in terms of captivating us, all of that stuff. But they're unfortunately a little bit like the junk food of relationships. Very appealing, but completely unsatisfying at its core. And as the technology gets better and better, we're going to have to work harder and harder to remind our brains this isn't a person we're talking to. And that's kind of what we're facing into at the moment. These tools have no moral responsibility. They have no personality. They have no emotion. They come with whatever bias is built into them. The results of the early adoption are also very worrying. Lots of vulnerable people are getting sucked in to talk to these AIs for hours and hours on end. Imagine when robotics catches up with some of this technology and you actually have someone in the world walking around and talking like that. So we have to remember this is simulated connection, not real connection, and it's ultimately not good for us. The second challenge for us is that for many people, this is, if we go to the next slide, sorry, Phil, and go to the next one again. These relationships are easier than real relationships. And this is the real temptation for people, because these tools are designed to give us exactly what we want. Has anyone ever had a good relationship where the person gives you exactly what you want? Has anyone ever had a relationship where people might have their own opinions, their own ideas? They don't speak to us the way we would like them to speak to us. They annoy us, they frustrate us, they disagree, they say the wrong things. Real relationships require a lot of risk. They require you to put yourself out there, to be vulnerable, to say things that you're not sure what the other person is going to say to. And yet we learn in relationships to navigate those differences when people feel differently and think differently to us. These AI tools do not do that. They're just a mirror. They give you what you want. And so they're easy, they're simple, they're low drama. This is why the whole AI boyfriend-girlfriend thing's kicking off, because they say exactly what you'd like to hear, unlike a real person. And it's a problem because lots of people are not learning the skills of real relationships in this world. And so whether this directly affects you today or not, trust me, this affects people in your life today. Are they building real relationship skills where you are in a room with someone you disagree with or don't like or are frustrated with, and you have to be in a room with them? For people working remotely, this is even less of a thing. You can just ignore the colleague that really winds you up. You're not in the space with them. But because it's the easy path, as humans, we will always be tempted to take it. And the problem with that is that when you don't have real connection, you miss out on some of the negatives, perhaps, but you get none of the positives of real relationships. You don't get the joy that's forged. Now, as Christians, we believe that relationships are fundamentally about love. And love requires someone other than ourselves. Love requires there to be two people in that relationship. Joy is only found when we share experience with other humans. And our greatest joys in life are usually when we do something or are with someone that we really love. And when you opt out of real relationships, you opt out of all the joy that we were actually made for. And the third problem is that all these tools tend to give us that sense of power or control. And some have even equated technology to magic. There's a famous law from sci-fi that says any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. If it gets advanced enough, then we think it's magic. And most of us have got no clue how our phones work, no clue how our computers work. They just do things. It's like magic, isn't it? But at the core, magic is about us trying to control the world to do things that we want it to do. It's actually about control. We don't have time to, but there's examples of this in the Old Testament where people are trying to do things to manipulate and control environments. And it's addictive. Like, we've had smart bulbs and smart speakers in our house for years now, and I still love the feeling of when you speak to it and it turns the light on. Or you press a button on your phone and the light pops on. You feel superhuman, don't you? You're just like, oh, how good am I? And that's what technology is doing. It feeds us this kind of sense of control that we have. And of course, in January 2020, we all felt we were unstoppable and nothing could change us, and we were on this global trajectory of wealth and prosperity, and then a microscopic virus reminded us that none of us are really in control. And that is the perspective I think we need to have as Christians. As believers, we need to have a realistic worldview. And that realistic worldview means that we recognize there are large parts of our lives we're out of control in. We know the one who is in control, but we personally are not in control parts of our life. And technology will lure us in to think we can. But the reality is that there's lots of parts of our life we cannot control. So there's problems that we really need to be aware of. And like I say, I think at the moment we're in a bit of an AI bubble. I do think it's a bubble, a bit like the dot-com bubble or whatever, that is going to burst at some point because we're starting to taper off. The technology is not going to continue to grow at the pace it's currently growing at. But there will be more developments in the future. But how do we respond as church? Do we have to escape to some desert island and set up a new monastery where we just avoid all technology? Or do we have to become like the Amish where we set a certain point where we stop technology? Like, it was good up till this point and then we stop? Or how do we respond as Christians in this? And it's the most basic answer I could possibly give you. We need to prioritize real, physical, face-to-face relationships and keep championing them in people's lives. Genesis 2:18 again. The Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone." And then Matthew 22, where Jesus said how humans can thrive, he says, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself." Connection with God, connection with other people around us. I think this season is a massive opportunity for the church. The most beautiful community in the world that we have. This is an opportunity for us, a place of real relationship. We have a Savior who came not as a robot, but came in the flesh to come so that we might be in the flesh for one another, that we might embody relationships with others. Face-to-face, shared experience, openness, vulnerability, risk, joy, sadness, conflict, forgiveness, sharing our lives together. You simply cannot escape the fact that sitting in a room together, chatting with someone is really good for you and better than any form of technology. And again, the science backs it. All the research that's been done into digital relationships versus face-to-face relationships affirms the obvious, that being in the room with someone changes the quality of the relationship. There's all the little things that we don't get through technology, all the little cues we give one another, all the non-verbal communication, just the simple presence of another person, the full experience. This is how we combat loneliness and isolation. Real relationships, though, are awkward. They're difficult. They require more time. They require more planning, more inconvenience. There's more likelihood that you're going to get misunderstood. But the great thing about real relationships is they actually change us. They form us. They shape us. You're changed and you're shaped by the real relationships that you have. Because without real relationships, I think God gave us one another so that we would grow up into the fullness that He has for us. Because it's only in real relationships that you can learn to love. You know, love is patient, love is kind, all these things. You don't learn patience on your own. You don't learn kindness on your own. You don't grow up into love without real relationships. And if we want to be shaped into the image of Christ, the relationships in our life are the key component that will do that will shape us and change us and chip off the difficult bits of our character and chip off the difficult bits in our hearts and open us up again to experience love. So we have to prioritize physical relationships in the lives of others. I mentioned earlier the book Bowling Alone, and there's a really helpful analogy they give there to do with technology. Because I don't believe also in a world, I'm using technology all around me here. I don't believe we need to live in a world where we don't use technology. We just need to put it in its proper place. If we go to the next slide, most of you will know that steel is a very strong alloy. We build skyscrapers with it. We can go really tall. We can build amazing things with steel. And it's an alloy, of course, so it's not naturally found in the world. You cannot just dig up some steel. Steel is made by the combination of taking iron, which is a strong metal in its own right, and adding something to it like carbon. And when you add those two things together, it becomes even stronger. So iron is like a really strong metal in its own right. Carbon is actually very fragile and very brittle and kind of easily broken. But when you combine it with the strength of the iron, it becomes something even stronger, steel, which has enabled most of the modern world to build these big buildings. In this analogy, he makes the point that basically our real in-person relationships are like the iron. The strong, stable, it's actually pretty strong on its own. But with the help of the weaker, fragile, digital communication, we actually can build something even stronger together. But it's about building them in the right way. Understanding that the core of who we are, because I think it's something like 80 or 90% iron and like 10% carbon or whatever. Our digital communications work really well when they're built on top of real physical relationships. When you can text someone that you know and you have friendship with, then that's great. When you can message someone when you're not with them, that is a good and a healthy thing. But if the basis of your entire relationship is only mediated forms of communication, then that will lead to a weaker relationship. I found that analogy helpful. So, it's great that we can record these talks and put them out online, but I'd so much rather we were in the room together. It's great that we can listen to the most amazing worship songs that have ever been produced from the comfort of our homes. But I'd so much rather we stood next to each other and sung the songs out from our heart. We can, of course, pray for each other through messaging apps. We can send you, praying for you, praying emoji. But how much better is it to be in a room with someone and pray with them? It's not that one's good and one's bad. It's just there's better and there's worse. As our world is reshaped by incoming technology, we're going to have our wits about us, let's be honest. We're going to have to be wise and shrewd about how we adopt technology. Now, there are, of course, loads of ways in which this technology is going to really help us. I don't want you to leave here thinking that all technology is bad. I don't have the time to cover some of the ways in which these breakthroughs are going to reshape our world for the positive, because that's true too. But I think we've got to really have our wits about us, about what does it mean to have connections and relationships with one another. However alluring the promise of connection, we must realize that we're made for something more. And that's a living connection with God and a living connection with other people. And as I said, I think this is a great opportunity for the church. If we go to the last slide. I think the people sitting next to you, this is the opportunity. That we are community, that we are people who care about one another, that we are involved in each other's lives, that we see one another, that we invest in relationships. And we can play a role, I think, in this season. How can we help people build relationships? How do we, and it sounds so basic, but how do we help particularly the younger generations who are being attacked by some of these changes? How do we be a place where we help people build relationships? Build connections, be healthy, be the kind of people who are community and put our arms around one another. And we need to play a role as church in defending the vulnerable, the people who will be taken advantage of in these times. Whether that is children, people with learning difficulties, the neurodivergent, the elderly, any vulnerable group in this season, we need to protect. And show them that there is real connection and real solutions to their loneliness. This is an opportunity. And when I reflect on the New Testament, they, of course, didn't have social media or AI or computers, and as we read it, but they do make use of one form of kind of world-changing technology at the time, and that was letters. Of course, the New Testament is full of letters. They're sending letters back and forth. But I think we need to have the same sort of attitude that Paul does, which is basically, he says multiple times, I'm writing you this letter, but I long to be with you. And I think that's the attitude that we need to have. We can use the technology. We can use it to our advantage. It can be a great tool in our lives. But at the heart of it, we need to see past the technology to the humans, to the relationships, and say, I long to be with you. And it's not complicated. In some ways, it feels strange having to say to a church. And I'm not saying it because we don't do it. But I'm saying we need to double down on these sort of things. In-person relationships, caring for one another. That's something AI will never be able to do. Our response to our culture in this time needs to be one of love and compassion, because there's lots of broken people turning to all sorts of solutions in our day. I was really struck by Jesus' words, which we'll finish with today in Matthew 9. And we come again back to the sheep and the shepherd, which we didn't plan. This is when Jesus looks out on the crowd and he says, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And that's how I kind of feel when I look out at the culture of our day, is like they need the good shepherd. They need someone who's going to show them that there is a different way to life, that the good life is not found in all the things that our culture promises them. I learned this week from Nicky Gumbel, the kind of creator of Alpha, and he does like the Bible in the Year and stuff, that these words harassed and helpless could be translated anxious and depressed. Does that not sit right into our culture? He had compassion on them because they were anxious and depressed, like sheep without a shepherd. What a role we could play in this season as church, to be a place of love and hope. In a world that's anxious and depressed, we get to bring them the compassion and the love of Jesus, the good shepherd who wants to lead us into loving relationships with him and with one another. So that's the message. We just need to love one another. It's a simple one, but I think in our culture it's going to become increasingly radical. Let me just pray, and then I'm going to hand back over to Joe. God, we pray for your wisdom in this season. We thank you that you care for us, that you love us, that you made us to know you and to know others in our lives. And as we do as humans, we get excited about the new and the shiny. God, I pray that you'd give us wisdom as we navigate this season. That we would be able to recognize the true from the distraction. That we would get to build real relationships that strengthen us. And I pray for protection over people in our communities whose mental health is struggling, whose loneliness is severe. And I pray if there's ways in which we can be love to them, if we can reach out to the broken and the vulnerable, God, I pray that we would have compassion on them. And I pray that we would be like a beacon, this church of relationships and healthy, hopeful relationships, where we invest in one another, we care for one another, we walk through the difficult times, and we celebrate in the good times. I pray we would be marked by your love in this season, God. Amen.